Through this build, I discovered that I am a masochist, because I like to choose builds that make me suffer. Because today we're building a Amur Leopard habitat in the shape of a leaf, because why not? Let's get started. Alright, to get started on the habitat that made me suffer. Like, the Amur Leopards just put me through all 6 stages of grief. A lot of sadness, a lot of despair. In the end there was acceptance, but damn was the road tough to get to there. And I didn't actually choose this build or this idea for a build to make me suffer. I originally, very stupidly, thought that this build would be easy. And I had a lot more easier builds lined up in the first place. This is the build that I basically wanted to have at the entrance, just so that it would be visible from the outside of the zoo. So it's kind of like that teaser habitat that, like, if you're walking up to Naturalis, you might spot the Amur Leopards. And so I was just like, alright, it needs to be like a showstopper. It needs to draw your eye, even maybe a bit more so the closer you get to it than the UFO that's the entrance. And so there was always this sort of, not dome shape, but this rounded shape just to make it blend in with the UFO. But originally it was just kind of more like the Red Panda habitat, with a square structure in the front and then the more rounded area in the back with the actual habitat. And then I decided, yeah, that's not really going to work. It's going to feel basically the same as the Red Panda habitat. Originally I also had intended for this habitat to have a bit more of a functional side to it. I wanted to have a keeper hut with it and an information desk. And then as soon as it transformed into the leaf-shaped monstrosity that it's now, then I decided, yeah, that's not going to work here. There's not going to be enough place here, so that idea was scratched as soon as it became this leaf-shaped iron structure pit thing. Like, I have no idea what to call this structure. And just know that Leaf would be proud of me. Also, Leaf, if you're watching this, please send help. Please send psychiatric help. I need it after this build. Because the structure or the shape of it might make Leaf proud, but it made me cry. Because I wanted, as I said, I wanted it to kind of work with the entrance. Like, I wanted it to be a showstopper, but still kind of work with the entrance. Because so far, the entrance is kind of like it's its own thing with the UFO. However, the meerkat habitat, the Red Panda habitat, or not so much the Red Panda habitat, but the gift shop, they kind of have this cohesive style. Even though the meerkat was supposed to be kind of inspired by a beach villa and the gift shop is more inspired by a forest villa, they have a cohesive style nonetheless, with this more square-ish structure, the black roofs and such. So they are a cohesive style on their own. And then you have the UFO or the entrance that just completely just stands apart from everything. So I was just like, alright, I need something that's, or at least I need the thing that's going to be next to it to be cohesive with the entrance. So that it doesn't like become this chaotic mess. So I always wanted to have like some kind of dome thing next to it. And then as soon as it became this leaf-shaped thing, I stupidly still thought I can put a glass dome on top of it. Or at least I can make this sort of iron structure still have a glass roof. Which, yeah, it didn't work. Or at least it could have worked if I had given myself a month. Because I would have probably needed to use the tiniest glass pieces to make it work. And nobody got time for that. Or at least my brain didn't have time for that, because my brain was busy trying to save that one remaining brain cell. It's just crying out for mercy right now. But yeah, so I don't know what to call this structure. Like, it's just this iron frame. It doesn't have like, it does have the iron or the iron mesh fencing on the flat bit of it, because it has this, of course, the curved like structure on top of it, and then there's a flat iron structure in the middle just for support. and that flat structure does have like the iron mesh fencing, just so that the Amur Leopards don't escape, because even though Planet Zoo says like, oh yeah, these iron beams or rods aren't climbable, I could just see in real life that an Amur Leopard just gets up there and escapes. So I put some mesh fencing on there, I put some foliage on there, so that from the sky, if you're looking at it with a bird's eye view or from Google Maps, it very much looks like a leaf. Actually, it looks like a leaf with a berry, because I basically copied the UFO just smaller for the indoor section for the Amur Leopards. But when you're looking at it from just a ground view, it looks like a melted dome. Like, it looks like a melted dome, mutated, it might start eating brains. But from the sky, from Google Maps, it looks like a leaf with a berry. So, yay! Like, it really looks like just the typical, like, Christmas decoration. I think we all know, like, the Christmas decoration that's just like a few leaves and such, and then there's just very red berries. I think it's like mistletoe. I never actually... Yeah, I don't think I ever had like anything to do with like mistletoe or something like that. Anyways, let's get back into the builds. So, yes, as I said, this structure, now please let me know down below in the comments what I could call this structure. Because I have no idea. It's not a dome, it's some sort of iron framing structure, canopy thing. I have no idea, but please let me know down below in the comments what I could call it. But when it comes to the entire structure, because this is probably one of the biggest builds that I've made so far, or at least the most like difficult build, I would say, because like, yes, the parking lot is the biggest structure. Someone pointed it out actually in the last video of like seeing the zoo and then just the just insane, like the huge parking lot that is realistic. But just seeing just like how the scaling goes of like the... Oh yeah, you have this zoo, but then the parking lot is like the same size or like 1/3 of the size of a zoo. Quite realistic. But then you get to this build, and even though it's not as large in scale as the parking lot, it was the more difficult build to make, just because organic structures are very difficult to build. Like complete rounded things or rectangular things, like primary shapes, I think is the right word for it. But those are, for me at least, a lot easier to build. And then you build something organic or organic looking, and it's just like, nope. Like building the indoor section for the Amur Leopards was a relief, because it's basically just a rounded UFO dome, but it's just completely round, so it's very easy for me to build. And then you build a leaf. It would have made even more sense, or it would make Leaf even more proud if it was actually a flamingo habitat under a leaf. Like, then I could have just shoved it in his face. But, yeah, no, there's leopards in there. Sorry, Leaf, no flamingos for you today. Although Leaf did give me like a mod to make the toilet buildings invisible, so that I didn't have to build a 4-meter high toilet building, which might be the next build. Even though the build of today, like the Amur Leopard habitat, is actually encroaching on where... Well, encroaching. It basically took over the entire side of where I wanted the toilet to be. So that's why I haven't used that mod yet. But yeah, to me, that's just always a strange thing when it comes to just this... I won't say functionality, but facilities in Planet Zoo. They're all 4 meters high. Just look at any building. Like, a lot of the times, stories aren't 4 meters high. They're like, at most 3 meters. So having a 4-meter high toilet building, to me was just like, what the hell is going on here? But anyways, when it came to the indoor section for the Amur Leopards, here is where the trauma began. Well, not trauma, where just the decision had to be made of like, do I want to basically separate this habitat into 2 habitats? Because Amur Leopards are solitary animals. Like, unlike lions, they don't group together unless it's mating season. And I had to do some research on Amur Leopards, or at least, well, on Amur Leopards, but also on their habitats, because I was thinking like, oh, could I still put them together? Like the habitat is large enough. Funnily enough, in the end, it's not. It started off being 1,400 square meters, which is above the size requirements for Amur Leopard. In the end, it's too small, but I decided not to change the habitat because first of all, I am not going to change this habitat for the life of me when I already finished like the sort of iron structure and such in the leaf shape. I was just like, yeah, you're just going to have to deal with it. And also because it's too small by 12 or 10 square meters. The Amur Leopards are just going to have to deal with that they don't have the full size requirement and that they are missing 10 square meters. I'm not going to deal with that. That's just you. The leopards are just going to have to deal with that. I'm not going to change it after that much time building. So yeah, the habitat is actually a bit too small, but we're just going to have to manage with it because I am not going to deal with it. But I did separate it eventually into 2 habitats so that when like the Amur Leopards are like in heat, I think is the right word to say, but like when it's mating season, they can open the gates between the 2 habitats and make it 1 habitat, which of course for Planet Zoo I just kept the gates open because when I think of building a Planet Zoo I always think of like just building in sort of a freeze moment where things are just open and such, because I mean that's just how I build. Also again because the habitat would be too small if I kept the gates closed, and when it comes to keepers and the animals and such, if I kept the gates closed it would probably mess stuff up. I mean it's already messed up because I put 2 climbing structures in the interior or like the indoor section of the Amur Leopard habitat. I put them against the wall that divides the 2 habitats, which basically fucked up the entire habitat, or at least that part of the habitat, because the Amur Leopards can just phase through the wall because there's a climbing structure that is attached to it. Yes, I've seen them do that multiple times now where they're just like on the, like they never do it from like the right side to the left side, but if they walk into the left side of the indoor habitat or indoor section for their habitat, they just like, as soon as they start walking on the climbing structure, I'm just like, yeah, you are going to jump through the wall, aren't you? And there they go. It's fun to see. It's not realistic, of course. Also, phasing through walls is probably the least useful ability to ever have. Like, having control over time is probably the most useful, I would say, because you can just like, depending on how you use it, because if you have to freeze everything in the world, then it's maybe not as useful. But if you can like freeze a pocket of the world or like just a small area, then it would be useful. Like if you can freeze it, maybe speed it up and such, like it will be more useful than like flight and such. You know, if you can like, you freeze the entire world, but you have one plane that you unfreeze so that you can just fly, and nobody's going to do anything because all of the cops are frozen and such. You know, you can have your own private jet. However, you would also need to learn how to fly. So maybe it's not the most useful, but then you also can just freeze the world, freeze maybe your own metabolism and such, and so stop aging and learn everything you want. How did we get onto this tangent? Oh yeah, because of the Amur Leopards phasing through the walls or jumping through the walls. But yeah, the main reason for why the Amur Leopard habitat is too small is just because I divided it into 2 by the way of a rock wall that's inspired by the mountains in China, because the Amur Leopards are, if I'm correct, native to this area on the border of Russia and China, if I'm correct. I really thought that they were native to the Himalaya, but I think that I'm confusing them there with the snow leopards, which was also a potential animal for this habitat. Might actually work better if the size requirements for the snow leopards is lower. But yeah, I really had fun with this build, just because organic structures, as I said, are a lot more challenging to build than prime or organic structures. Organic shapes are more difficult to build than primary shapes, if that's the correct word for it, like complete round and rectangulars and such. So this was definitely the most difficult build that I have made so far. Like even like builds in Kiana Bashar and such were not as well, The Geosphere was pain, but recently this build has been the most difficult build. Like, yes, scale-wise, it's not as big as the parking lot, it's not as boom in your face as the UFO entrance, but it definitely was the most difficult to build and had that challenge that I really like. Let's now talk again about the actual build itself, because now we are at the climbing structures, which I will just be honest about. I'm not good with climbing structures. I don't have the mind for climbing structures. And so I was looking up climbing structures for like lions and tigers in zoos. None of them really took my fancy. And then I saw these huge cat balls. Don't know why Pinterest thought like, oh, you're looking for climbing structures in zoos? Here, I have this giant cat ball, or giant cat like scratching ball thing that was bigger than a house. And was covered in cats, which I want to say for some reason, but we all know why. Even as a kid, I loved climbing trees. Cats also love climbing things. They also love knocking things down. They also love being assholes. Like, cats are amazing animals. Not primarily because they're cute and stuff. No, it's because they're complete dumbasses. Like, cats are, like, I love cats just because they act all high and mighty, and then they are complete dumbasses 90% of the time. The same actually goes with dogs. Dogs don't act all high and mighty. I love all animals, but like especially cats, it's just like it's the contrast between how they act and or how they behave, and then the actions that they take, where it's just like, do you have any brain cells in there? You ran straight into a wall and then act all high and mighty. You're a dumbass, and I love you for it. But yeah, when it came to the climbing structures, as I said, not inspired by actual real life zoo climbing structures, no, by giant cat balls. And the Amur Leopards loved them, which was a surprise because usually the animals don't really love the climbing structures that I build because I'm not that good at them. And so seeing the Amur Leopards just going complete crazy about them, of course, there's some funky shit that happens with the climbing because, yes, Plant Zoo's climbing is good, but it has like 9 out of 10 times it messes up. It does mess up usually in funny ways where they moonwalk and such, but just to see the animals love the climbing structure is great. The same actually goes with the red pandas. Like, for some reason, Naturalis, the climbing structures so far, work really well with the animals, which is, to me, a surprise. And then we get onto some smaller stuff, which are the education boards, eventually also an insect hotel. But when it came to the education boards, I was just like, I want something that looks futuristic and also looks kind of realistic. So I got inspired by this concept art from Assassin's Creed with these rounded screens, or at least this rounded structure with the screen in it. And I was like, I need that, it works. And then I added speakers to it with some buttons, so if you have limited vision, you can just press a button. There's probably braille on the button so that you can like press the button with like the correct language, and then you can just hear what's going on, what the animal is, information about the animal and such. I don't really have much more to say about that, so we're going to move to the insect hotels, which I know a lot of people will probably be like, but then I'm going to be surrounded with bees and wasps and such. And yes, that's probably going to be true. Like, I have already told the story once about me eating an apple in a zoo, and for some reason, like, I'm not afraid of insects. Like, bees are cute, spiders cute, all other insects cute. Mosquitoes, wasps, and hornets, well, kill all of the mosquitoes, but the wasps and hornets, less cute, but, you know, still useful when it comes to the environment. I, for some reason, freaked out when I was just being chased, well, not chased, but when a wasp or a hornet just flew around me constantly, like, trying to get to the apple, and I freaked out for some reason and dropped the apple. Now I'm just thinking of, like, I think it's like a scene in Family Guy with, like, the, not stereotype, but the bees on steroids that just lift up jars and such. Now I have just a mental image of a bee flying off with the apple, or a hornet or a wasp. Because it was the bee, definitely wasn't the bee. Bees are more friendly. But yeah, because Naturalis is all about the environment and such, and because I just like insects, I needed an insect hotel. And so I placed it. I built it. I really like how it looks. Like, it just reminds me of, like, it's a very much futuristic, modern looking insect hotel. Most of them that I've seen so far, like even the one that Frontier included, they are this more like traditional, like sort of cottagecore-esque insect hotel. And I was just like, yeah, that's not going to work in Naturalis. I need a modern looking one, slightly futuristic looking one. And it ended up working. So that's basically going to be it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a wonderful day, guys, and now let's see the end result.